process of being litigated by the courts. ICE just keeps tabs on immigrants like that. This woman showed up to her 6-month checkup, expecting, I'm sure, to be released because it sounds like, based on the reporting, she'd been complying with whatever it is she was supposed to be doing during the course of these checkups and the periods in between. So she showed up with 2 daughters. Her 2-year-old, an American citizen who was born here and for whom there was a birth certificate, and her 11-year-old daughter, the 2-year-old's sister. Now, it gets a little complicated because what happened was ICE took them all into custody. And ICE then claimed, not to worry, the mother, whom we're going to deport back to Honduras, says she wants to take her daughter with her. And there's a handwritten note to that effect in the reporting. The judge takes that note and says, well, that's all well and good. I'm going to need to look into this myself, get some evidence to support these claims. And the judge, Brian, was in the process of doing that. In the meantime, the father, who apparently also had no legal status here, had hired a lawyer, had sent a representative into court to say, no, we're going to keep the child here. The child's a U.S. citizen. We're going to assume custody. And ICE wouldn't let the 2-year-old go. So there is a little bit of a dispute as to which parent sort of was in a position to actually take custody. But the thing is, Brian, the judge essentially wanted to slow all this down. And when he made a call to try to look into the validity of the note ICE claimed the mother had written saying, I want to take my 2-year-old with me, the judge was told, sorry, plane's already either in the air or it's already landed in Honduras. Begin to sound familiar to other deportation, unlawful, unconstitutional deportation incidents we've been contending with in recent weeks. So now the judge sounds like this is my word, he is pissed. And he set a hearing for May 16th, and I'm sure he's going to call the DOJ to the carpet and say, I was in the process of making sure this was on the up and up. I had adequate evidence to resolve this issue as to whether the 2-year-old, an American citizen, should remain with her father or with a lawful guardian as opposed to being taken by the mother back to Honduras when she was being deported. And you basically just pulled the judicial rug out from under me. Again, this is my characterization, and we will see what the judge says at this May 16th hearing about what it seems like he has already concluded, the deportation unlawfully, unconstitutionally of a 2-year-old by the Trump administration.
So where do we stand right now? Because we've seen that now it's a recurring theme, right? This is what the Trump administration has shown its hand is going to continue doing. It's going to allow the courts to play some initial process, but at the end of the day, they're going to deport before the cases actually reach the conclusion. And so are we just going to see this process continue to play itself out where we get half of a decision by these courts, but the Trump administration just gets bored of waiting and keeps sending these people out, and we just keep running after them? Yeah. Or is there going to be some proactive action taken here where the courts can actually put a stop to what the administration is doing?
Yeah, great question, because you know what? Half a constitutional loaf when it comes to one's due process rights is no loaf at all.
Yeah.
So what I suspect, just as we are seeing contempt proceedings working their way through the courts in D.C., in the Venezuelan immigrant case being presided over by Judge Boasberg, in Maryland with the Abrego Garcia potential contempt citation of the government working its way through the Maryland federal courts, we are likely to perhaps see the hat trick now of possible contempt proceedings. Now, mind you, Brian, none of these have come to fruition with courts actually holding Trump administration officials in contempt. But it seems like Donald Trump is itching to dare the courts to just go ahead and start holding my ICE officials or my Homeland Security officials in contempt. And then let's see you try to enforce your contempt order. So Donald Trump is forever moving in the direction of a true constitutional crisis. He pulls us closer and closer and closer to the cliff. But as you say, this is frustrating because how many times will the Trump administration be allowed to get away with it before the courts, really put their judicial foot down and put not only some sanctions, but some preventative measures in place.
Glenn, I have to ask because it feels frustrating to hear that sanctions might be imposed when I'm not fully convinced that even the prospect of sanctions is going to be enough of a deterrent. So what do sanctions mean in this case? And do you believe that even the imposition of strong sanctions are enough of a deterrent for these lawyers who continuously come into the courtrooms, whether it's here in this case that we're talking about right now, whether it's the previous case that we were talking about with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and certainly the cases that are going to be forthcoming?
You know, Brian, I join you in not being convinced that sanctions are going to be enough. But at the end of the process, sanctions can mean, and I would argue should mean, jailing Trump administration officials who continue to unconstitutionally deport human beings, because that, I can almost guarantee you, will get the Trump administration to sit up, to take notice. Now, getting those contempt orders executed is another challenge that we've addressed before, and we will probably have the opportunity to address it again in very real, concrete terms once we are there. We're not there yet. But let me tell you, all of these stupid-ass games that the Trump administration officials are playing, and they're getting away with more and more unconstitutional deportations like you, leaves me frustrated. And the courts at some point have to reach the ultimate but lawful remedy of jailing people who are unconstitutionally supporting human beings.
Look, Glenn, the difficult part here is that these cases have to be taken on an individual basis, and that there's no sweeping ruling that can apply to all of them as a sort of precedent. But to that exact point, is there some way that some broader precedent could apply so that we're not chasing after this stuff in scattershot rulings, in piecemeal rulings, where the Trump administration knows that they can really get an edge on all of these different district courts?
Yeah, here's some bad news, Brian. We've already had such a ruling 9-0 from the Supreme Court saying,
and the Trump administration didn't even bother to listen to that one.
They didn't even flinch when the Supreme Court in a unanimous ruling said everyone is entitled to due process, a fancy term for simply notice of what the government intends to do to you before they do it, and a sufficient amount of time. One judge has ruled 21 days for the person to obtain a lawyer and go into court and have part two of their due process rights honored. Part two is an opportunity to be heard, to contest what the government is saying about them and trying to do to them, and get their day in court before a judge. It's actually not that damn hard to do, but the Trump administration wants to play games, wants to continue to violate the Constitution. So I envision these things going back to the Supreme Court. And, you know, at some point, it's put up or shut up time for the Supreme Court. They're going to have to put down some hard and fast, step-by-step rules that the Trump administration has to follow. And here's the thing, Brian. I am almost looking forward to the time that Donald Trump begins to openly defy direct, unambiguous Supreme Court rulings and orders, because at that point, it will be crystal clear that Donald Trump is trying to end our constitutional construct and government. That's the stuff of impeachment and removal. Not that I'm pretending it will inspire congressional Republicans, House or Senate, to actually stand up for their constituents and for American democracy. But boy, I think it becomes so clear that we have a lawless president. Indeed, we have a dictator, an autocrat, that things are going to break. Something's got to give, and I just hope it's not our democracy.
Well, we will, of course, stay on top of this case as it relates to the raft of other cases along the same lines, where the Trump administration is now getting more and more emboldened in terms of who they deport. So for those who are watching right now, if you'd like to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. This is the best way to support our work and independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.